Whenever bands tour together, it sometimes ends with their egos butting heads, or the public just doesn't care enough to see them. In today's video, let's take a look at some of my favorite tour pairings of the 90s that just seemed odd. I imagine this will be part one of a longer series that I'll be doing, so let me know in the comments section what other tours you'd like to see me cover. This first tour happened in the late 90s, featuring two acts that were pretty synonymous with the decade, Hole and Marilyn Manson. Also part of the tour was Monster Magnet, whose frontman David Windorf referred to the trek as, and I quote, a disaster. In 1998, Hole released their record Celebrity Skin, which was a top 10 hit, while Manson's Mechanical Animals was #1 on the charts. Both albums shared the same producer and Michael Beinhorn, and it was Hole's management, Q Prime, who also represents bands like Metallica, whose idea it was to pair Hole with Marilyn Manson. Courtney Love has stated in several interviews that she was instead hoping to tour with Alanis Morissette, and Courtney Love and Marilyn Manson didn't really get off on the right foot. It seemed to stem from things that Manson had written in his book, The Long Road Out of Hell, and an interview he gave to New Musical Express where he stated, "Courtney never bothered to say hi to me until I sold 1 million records. She's an opportunist and I wouldn't consider her a friend." Love also had her own reservations, claiming that she was worried about the impact that Manson's shows could have on her daughter Frances Bean, as well as Hole's audiences. But in reality, both groups really needed one another. While Mechanical Animals was #1, it didn't meet sales expectations. The album cover created issues with some stores refusing to carry it, and the album was predicted to sell in the range of 300,000 copies in its first week, but it sold 230,000 copies. The label head was furious at Manson over the artwork, so if the musician could get in front of a different audience, he could probably sell more albums. Hole also needed Manson because guitarist Eric Erlandson admitted that the band was struggling to find acts to tour with in North America. The bands agreed to tour provided it was billed as a co-headlining tour and the costs were evenly split. Manson put out a statement announcing the tour, revealing, "There was some tussling going on, and then I realized what better role models to lead the world than us two, so it had to be done." The tickets were being sold for around $30, and it was dubbed the Beautiful Monsters Tour. The trek was scheduled to be 37 shows, but things unraveled after only 9 dates. Gil Kaufman, who covered the tour for MTV, wrote, "Here you had two artists who were going for the brass ring in two different ways. Courtney Love had become a star with a Golden Globe nomination, and she'd made a much slicker pop album. Manson was in his glam metal apex and was being as debauched as he could. The band's audiences were completely different. Hole's audiences were referred to as Coachella babies, while Manson's fans were goths." Despite the wide press coverage the tour got, MTV reported that the opening night in Spokane was only half full. Only adding to the problems was the tension behind the scenes. Manson and Love couldn't agree on who should open, and it was Manson's preference to have Monster Magnet open the shows, and then there was disagreements over who should pay the opener. Since Manson wanted Monster Magnet on the bill, he ate the cost of the opener. But Hole was still unhappy since Manson had a much bigger stage setup than they did, and they were equally splitting the cost of production.
We have to split this thing 50-50, so every time that Brian wants a new light, he gets a new light. And every time he wants 9 more kabuki screens, he gets 9 more kabuki screens. And every time he wants a cannon, we have to pay for the cannon. And it's sort of out of control. It's like this raging production that we're paying for, and we have a little bit of glitter.
I had to pay for her yoga teacher and her personal chef also, so you know.
As playful sparring continued, even Manson's fiancée, actress Rose McGowan, was a point of contention.
There's some friction now and then.
Yeah. I wondered if she ever had to run interference between you and Courtney.
No, I've had to run interference between the two of them.
He told us that he's had to kind of separate you and Rose, I guess, when she's been out on the road, that you guys don't exactly get along. Rose, his girlfriend.
Is that the actress?
Yeah.
No, I honestly don't know her. I mean...
Yeah, Rose McGowan. Right.
Was she in... What? I don't know who she is.
When it came to things on stage, there seemed to be sniping between the bands as well. During the second show in Vancouver, Manson made a disparaging remark about Courtney Love, who came on stage and jumped on Manson's back. It was later on during the show Manson reportedly fell and injured his hand and cut the set short.
February 28th in Spokane, Washington. But from night #1, there was back and forth sniping, both in the press and on stage.
Did you guys have time to take a nap during Hall?
When we're done, some guy with a blue head is going to come on with a big sign that says drugs.
Manson's makeup was just one target of Courtney's jabs. She also knocked his use of pyro and his alleged lip syncing. While from Manson, there were plastic surgeon cracks and remarks about Courtney's age.
And I show pity for the older people on this tour. The grandmothers.
Tonight he made another like grandma crack.
He said a grandma. That guy is a year and a half younger than me.
Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. So if I'm grandma, he's grandpa.
Even backstage, the groups conducted themselves quite differently. Manson and company were partying a lot and indulging in illegal substances, while Courtney Love was said to have been fresh out of rehab and was trying to maintain her sobriety. But as the tour went on, the shenanigans on stage started making the rounds in the press. By the time the 9th date rolled around, Love announced she was done with the tour. So why did Hole leave the tour? Well, the Tampa Bay Times highlighted several reasons, including poor ticket sales, production costs, infighting, and how Manson's fans treated Hole. At one gig in Portland, Hole left the stage early after Manson's fans booed Courtney Love. An editor for Polestar was quoted as saying, "The pairing looked good on paper, but it may not have been the best idea," going on to add that Manson was playing in front of his own audiences, while the same audiences weren't as appreciative of Hole. Hole's management, Q Prime, claimed it was production issues, claiming that since production costs were subtracted before each band got paid, Manson's costs were so elaborate that they would have likely lost $150,000 to $250,000 if they chose to stay on the road. It was following Hole's departure that Manson and company continued to tour under the moniker Rock is Dead. As for Hole, things were a little rocky in the subsequent years. Geffen was merging with Interscope, and suddenly the type of music that Hole was playing wasn't deemed a priority compared to rap and hip-hop. As for Love and Manson's relationship, they seemed to at least bury the hatchet in 2014 when Love posted an image of herself with Billy Corgan and Marilyn Manson with the caption, "All hatchets buried." Turning on to our second ill-fated tour, in the early 90s, the economic recession was really impacting the music industry as concert ticket sales were slumping.
Plenty of bands went out on tour this year, but not a lot of people came to see them. Ticket sales plummeted at least 25% this summer, the season in which concert promoters traditionally do most of their business. A lot of them blame the recession.
Everybody that is alive in the United States of America is feeling the bite of the recession.
Acts are just dying. Concerts are dying all over the country. This is the worst summer for concerts I've ever seen.
Many promoters hope that package tours featuring several acts at a bargain price might bring out the crowd.
As a result, promoters had to get creative, and they turned to package tours to help sell shows. One of the most successful package tours was Lollapalooza, which was born in 1991. Lollapalooza allowed attendees to see a wide range of acts, including Nine Inch Nails, Jane's Addiction, and Susie and the Banshees, to name a few, in just one show. Moss Jacobs, who worked for the promoter who booked the tour, told the press, "We've seen a number of cases over the past 18 months where so-called headliners come out with unknown support acts and fall on their faces. Of course, the recession is hurting us." The concert industry hadn't really offered much in the way of anything new for the past few years. The only thing that the concert industry was offering consumers was higher ticket prices. The average ticket price in 1991 was set to be $23. Not only did heavyweights in certain genres tour together like Guns N' Roses and Skid Row, but also groups from completely different genres, sometimes referred to as mix and match tours. Enter Sisters of Mercy and Public Enemy's tour. Sisters of Mercy were quite popular in Europe and were playing bigger venues in the continent than in the States. The only way Sisters of Mercy could play similar-sized venues in America was to get booked with a big homegrown act like Public Enemy. Frontman Andrew Eldritch considered himself a fan of Public Enemy, telling an interviewer, "Unlike most hip-hop acts or disco acts, they actually stand for something. Their message is not external to the music. They're just another kind of rock and roll." Chuck D of Public Enemy echoed these sentiments, asking when the last time audiences were shocked by such a combination of acts. The tour also included Gang of Four, Warrior Soul, and a group called Young Black Teenagers. The idea was for the tour to take place over the summer of '91 and consist of about 20 or so shows, depending on what you read. The idea was to give equal stage time to Sisters of Mercy and Public Enemy. It would be kind of like a co-headlining tour. And on paper, it seemed like a good billing, allowing both acts to get in front of audiences who typically wouldn't see them. Eldritch didn't see a big deal out of the billing, telling an interviewer, "From a European point of view, it's a more normal thing. It's sad that it takes a recession in America for promoters to start thinking of these packages." He went on to add that when his band was starting out in London in their early days, they normally shared the bill with a reggae band. But despite the acts thinking they were breaking down barriers, some markets didn't want them. Eldritch added, "There were certain towns, certain cities on this tour where we couldn't find a house manager who was prepared to put both bands on the same venue on the same night." He added that in Detroit, a city which gave birth to Motown, was not interested. The apprehension had to do with the fact that some promoters didn't want to have rap acts on the bill, as there had been some reports of violence at past shows. There was also concern that Sisters of Mercy's typically white audience paired with Public Enemy's audience could result in problems. The promoters who did end up booking the tour weren't allowed to play host to the concerts in the inner cities, so instead the shows happened far into the suburbs, making transportation to these venues very difficult. Also working against the tour was that the bill was just too diverse, and even though violence was never an issue at shows, they just couldn't garner enough interest. For example, at the tour stop in Washington, D.C., Sisters of Mercy had previously played to about 3,000 people, and Public Enemy had played to about 18,000 people, but this package tour only resulted in 2,000 people showing up. At a show in Costa Mesa, California, only 4,000 people showed up at a venue that could house 19,000. Eldritch lashed out, telling an interviewer, "If the promoters had the balls to advertise it in urban areas and not just book it into every suburban area, just to make sure that everyone is 300% safe, it wouldn't have just done better business than everyone else except Jane's Addiction. It would have done extraordinary business." Also contributing to the issues was that Elektra, Sisters of Mercy's label, wasn't behind the idea. They were told by their label that Sisters of Mercy were too white and Public Enemy was too black. The tour ended up being scrapped about halfway through, as places like LA, Houston, Dallas, Denver, and Phoenix had their planned shows canceled. To add insult to injury, for the shows that did proceed, they were met with negative reviews, at least some of them. The Chicago Tribune wrote, for one review, "The result was a fascinating cultural event and frustrating concert in which the group's disparities became more apparent than any shared bond." Pop singer Madonna rose to stardom through New York's nightclub circuit in the 80s, and by the middle of the decade, she would become a sex symbol and have countless hits on MTV despite catching the ire of family values types. During one of her tours in the mid-80s, she chose to have an up-and-coming rap trio known as Beastie Boys. It was a strange choice given how different their music was from hers. In 1985, Madonna headed out on her first major tour. Titled Like a Virgin, she graduated from playing small venues like CBGB's to headlining arenas. Her manager ended up calling Russell Simmons and asked one of his artists to open for her on tour. It's been reported that originally Madonna wanted a comedy rap trio called the Fat Boys to open for her, but the problem was that Simmons didn't represent them, but wanting to keep her attention on the phone, he pretended like he did represent them, and he allegedly told her they were booked for another tour. So instead, he offered Run DMC, but Madonna's people thought that they were too expensive, so he offered the Beastie Boys instead. The rap trio at this point only had a handful of songs to call their own, so they were a bargain to Madonna and her team. She agreed, and so a tour was set in motion. Madonna's fans universally hated the Beastie Boys. The opening date of the tour started out at the Paramount Theater in Seattle. Madonna and the Beastie Boys played 3 dates there, and the plan was to graduate to playing arenas after that. But the Beastie Boys almost got canned from the tour after those dates due to the audience's poor reaction to their 30-minute set. Madonna's management wanted to fire the group, but the pop star refused to kick them off since she counted herself a fan. Ad Rock told Jimmy Fallon in 2015, "We played the first couple shows and they hated us. She realized that the audience hated us so much that by the time she got on stage, it was the greatest thing ever." Rick Rubin was the Beastie Boys DJ, but after the first week, he had to fly back to New York City and he just never came back to the tour. Beastie Boys ended up renting a Lincoln Continental to get them from city to city. They opted not to bring a change of clothes, instead wearing the same clothes for the duration of the tour. Following one show in Los Angeles, the Beastie Boys crashed Madonna's after party and hung out with celebrities who had no idea who they were. The Virgin Tour ended in 1985 with a 5-night residency in New York that was split between Madison Square Garden and Radio City Music Hall. During her last performance, the Beastie Boys came on stage at the end of Madonna's performance and soaked her with a water gun. Then 1 year later, the rap trio released 1986's License to Ill, and it went on to become one of the biggest rap-selling albums of the decade. And throughout the next 2 decades, they became one of the biggest and most influential rap groups in history. Ad Rock told Spin in 1998, "It's not like any of us knew Madonna that much, but we used to hang out at Danceteria Club, so we knew of each other. I don't know why she thought it was a good idea for us to open that tour. It was a terrible idea." That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again in Rock Culture Story sticker.